to share with you guys a little bit of a different topic because didn't Jen and Denise do such a great job today? Can we give them a round of applause? Normally, actually, when I get to speak with groups like this, I do the training that Jen did today, the Trafficking 101. So I'm actually super pumped to be able to share a different thing today, a different topic today with you guys, and connect the local church to this trafficking work. But first, I just want to tell you guys a little bit about myself. So we were in Vegas the last 3 years of our lives. Before that, we were in Montana. I spent about 12 and a half years as a staff pastor, working on staff and youth and on a speaking team. And then after 12 and a half years of ministry, God broke our heart for trafficking. And in 2014, this is a long story short, we jumped into this work full-time, launched in 2014 full-time, working with a couple of organizations. Now we work full-time with 3 different nonprofits. Operation for Freedom, which is my wife and I's organization. Say Something School Assembly, speaking in schools all across the nation. And then Free International, which is our big umbrella organization that I work full-time with across the nation on missing kid searches. And so when we jumped in, our hearts were broken. And it was actually at an event similar to this event where you just kind of show up, you don't really know all the details about trafficking, but it's, you know, something's happening in your world and in your community, and bam, God plants a seed in your heart and it changes you and it breaks your heart. And I'm an emotional guy. I have 2 daughters and a beautiful wife, and my daughters are 9 and 12. I'm about to have a 13-year-old, and we're contemplating getting her a phone. We're going through all that right now. And so I'm a crier. We watch, girly movies, and I get emotional. So there's a connection between my daughters and this work. I have empathy, and I just go, man, maybe it's not my daughter out there in Mesa County, but it's someone's daughter. And we've got to fight for them, and that's why we're here today. So that's why we're learning the red flags. That's why we're going through the laws and the details and how texting and how sexual predators can lure our nieces and our nephews and our grandkids into this world. That's why we're here today. So it's an honor to be here with you guys. My wife's name is Ashley, and my daughter Chloe is 9, and Sydney is 12 years old. We're in Fruita now. We were in Vegas full-time before moving here. We worked with LVPD and local nonprofits on the ground in Vegas for many years, reaching out to trafficking victims. And so it's just an honor to be here and talk with you today about how we can get the church plugged in to this work and how we can make an impact as a community. Not just this church, but as community members, how we can make an impact. So I'm going to buzz through this real quick. I may play a video at the end, just depending on time, but I want to tell you about our organization in like 20 seconds here. I'm good about dismissing right on time, so when should I be done to the minute?
Well, for Q&A, we looked at Q&A at like 11:45.
11:45, got it. So we started this organization, Operation for Freedom, a few years ago. My wife and I, because our phone kept ringing, concerned grandparents, a niece or a nephew was in trouble, a parent would call and say, hey, there's a shady situation going on with my daughter or my son. And we jumped in and just started on our own, no organization, just started helping reach these shady situations when a concerned grandparent or an aunt or an uncle would call and say, hey, my kid's in trouble, can you help us? What can we do? And that kind of launched this organization called Operation for Freedom. And really, this is our mission. We find the vulnerable and offer hope. We don't rescue people. I don't tell individuals we rescue sex trafficking victims personally, because what we do is we find the vulnerable and we offer them hope. And it's really up to them to accept that hope. And if they do, man, I say they rescued themselves. They have made a decision that pulls them out. And we do this in a repetitive cycle. We find the vulnerable, and I'm going to talk about vulnerability in just a few moments because that's one of the keys when it comes to sex trafficking. But we find these individuals who are in bad situations, teenagers, kids, adults, and we offer them hope. And I think the church has some hope that we can offer that's even more powerful than any local resource or nonprofit. You're going to get me preaching this morning. The church has the hope of the world. And I think that we have a responsibility. If we go to church somewhere and we are I don't know if you're all churchgoers or not, or if this is your church, but the church has a responsibility, I believe, to offer that hope. And I think we can do it. So, one of the bedrock beliefs of our work, not just our organization, but just who we are, like just being in this since 2014, you kind of jump in head first. You don't know if there's water in the pool, and you just start going at it. And something that's really solidified in our hearts is prevention. And I love this quote. It's by Frederick Douglass. It's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. I just let that sink in for a few moments. In our world, with the brokenness, with what's going on, it's easier to prevent this from happening than it is for us to rescue someone on the streets. It's a broken life. To pick up the broken pieces of a young lady who's been exploited or prostituted on the streets of Las Vegas, or ran across the country through Mesa County, or in Salt Lake City, where we come to a drug-addicted young lady who maybe she's been on the streets since she was 12. Maybe she's been exploited since she was 14 years old by a so-called boyfriend and fallen for this Romeo pimp act that was put on. It's easier to stop this before it happens. And in general, if we can do anything and prevent this from happening, prevention isn't the sexy part of sex trafficking work, if I can say that in an inappropriate way. It's not the sexy part. The sexy part that makes the money, that makes the stories, is the rescues. Man, we busted down the door, and there she was on the bed, and the pimp, we slammed him against the wall, and we brought her out in our arms, and we put her in the fire department's hands, and she went into the ambulance, and her life was changed in that moment. And in reality, rescue is a process, not an event. And I think that's important. You can write that down if you're taking notes. Rescue is a process and not an event. And a process is work, it's education. Man, Jen nailed it on the head, where you have to be educated. You have to research this. You have to get into this to learn how to do this effectively. And rescue, if we're going to rescue our kids, if we're youth leaders, if we're grandparents, if we're just concerned citizens, we've got to realize that this is a process. It's not a black and white. There's not a line that says, now you're lost, now you're found. But you're lost, and then you're a little bit less lost, and you're a little bit less lost. It's not our faith. We're not talking about that. We're talking about this issue of abuse and exploitation. And there's a process to getting a person to that place of safety and rehabilitation. The average time length to rescue a young lady or to bring a person out of exploitation abuse is about 7 to 8 years. And so when you say, we want to rescue some sex trafficking victims, we want to rescue our kids, you're talking about one kid, 7, 8 years. It's a process. That's what we consider a process. And so if we can prevent it, prevention's always better than rescue. So I'm buzzing through this, but I just want to set up this talk, the first part being exploitation, and really change how we look. I really just want to change how we look at sex trafficking, if that can be done, and redefine it in our hearts, because the culture today, has really defined human trafficking, sex trafficking, exploitation. I use that word exploitation because it puts a different thing in our head, right? It puts a different thought. When I say sex trafficking, you have a thought, right? You have an idea of what sex trafficking is. If you're an older individual and you served in the war and you were in the Navy and trafficking, and you were on the islands and you pulled up to piers, and trafficking and prostitution is different in your mind than it is for the mom who is raising kids, and she sees social media ads popping up all the time, and she's online. Or maybe you've seen the movie Taken, and you think, well, this Taken is sex trafficking, and so when I say sex trafficking, you have a definition already in your head. If I say exploitation, that's not a common word, and I'm sure it will be at some point, but exploitation, you go, okay, what is exploitation? And I think it really hits the nail on the head when we're talking about this world of trafficking. And we specifically work in sex trafficking. I know a little bit about labor trafficking. We know some of the issues, but my wife and I, we specifically work in sex trafficking. So over the next couple minutes here, I hope I can, here's my goal, is we redefine what you think about exploitation and trafficking. We really set a kind of a new course. You know, like when you're looking at, if you ever look through a telescope in the stars, and you see the moon or whatever, but you just bump this thing an inch, that's like 1,000,000 miles in space. You know, like that's huge. If we can change that trajectory today of your thought life and what you think about trafficking, I think it's going to change your church, and how when you show up on Sunday mornings to your church or this church, wherever your church is, it's going to change how you interact with your church family, and it's going to help you to make a big impact. Okay, this is my goal. It's very practical. This is not the 101. This is how do we make a difference as a community. And let me tell you, I'm super thankful for Pastor Mike for jumping in. The first pastor, I don't even go to this church, but he's the first pastor who reached out to me and said, hey, I want to make an impact in our community when it comes to our kids, when it comes to trafficking, when it comes to abuse. Man, this dude's got a broken heart for making an impact in our community. And if this is your church, there's going to be a fund he's going to set up that's called sex trafficking, and you can throw money at that thing, I'm sure, and say, hey, we're going to make an impact in our community, and he's going to be the gatekeeper of that to really make an impact in our community. I'm just saying that. He didn't tell me to do that, so I'm probably in trouble. But
yeah, I'm going through my head going, what sip of coffee was that? I couldn't remember.
For, Pastor Mike,
but it's a great idea.
What he does.
Yeah.
So let's redefine this. So I got a little quiz here. I want to show you who is the trafficker and who is the victim. Let's, if you can see these pictures, some of you may need to put your Coke bottle lenses on. If you look, you know, like you wear some glasses like me. So I can make fun of people with glasses because I got some crazy thick ones here. So just let me know who the trafficker is and who the victim is. You don't really have to answer. I mean, you can just look and get your own opinion. I'll tell you who the trafficker is and who the victim is. Can you see that over there? Is this in your way?
The one in the upper left.
There we go. Got your answers ready? You're going to tell your neighbors so to see who gets it right.
Is there only one of each?
Who's the, that's, you get to pick those out. So who's the trafficker, who's the victim? Are we ready? Okay, they're all traffickers. So, yeah, all arrested for sex trafficking, prostituting girls out. So I remember walking into an illegal brothel in Las Vegas about a year ago right now. Some of the outreach that we do, church world you say outreach, and in the secular world you say operation, but we were doing this outreach into an illegal brothel in Las Vegas. There's about 168, 170. At any given time, about a block and a half off the strip of Las Vegas, there are active illegal brothels happening every day. Businessmen, women fly in to purchase sex from girls anywhere from 14 to 50, 60 years old. And I remember walking into this one brothel, and I know them as brothels or places you purchase sex, but you probably know them as massage parlors. And I remember walking into this one illegal brothel. The doorbell rang above, it's a buzzer, and when you walk into these places, there's an initial room, and there's another door that's locked, and there's a camera, and that you can't get into the second area. And as I walked into the first area, I was with a young lady who was there with me, and I remember looking over the counter. There was a Buddha statue and a little fountain and some music playing. It was a seedy, disgusting entryway that was just dirty. And I looked past the counter, and through the door, it was kind of halfway open. There was a cot, like a Cabela's camping cot, like a green cot. And there was these two little feet, and it looks like she was asleep. And when the doorbell rang, it kind of woke her up, and she began to stir. And in a moment, she opened the door, and she came around the corner, and it was about I would say 17-year-old young lady who was dressed in like a black slip. She was Asian, barefoot, and it was very just inappropriate. Wasn't a professional scrub with her hair up and short nails, and everything. Her breasts were exposed, and And she was not a professional massage therapist, 17, maybe 16 years old. That's just me guessing. And through broken English, she was confused because it wasn't just a guy there to purchase her, but it was this girl next to me. So she began to look at us with suspicion, like, are you in the wrong spot? Are you in the wrong business? You know, and through broken English, we began to explain to her, hey, we're out blessing businesses today. We're just appreciating workers. And, you know, through this conversation, very suspicious, a scowl on her face. We asked her, are you the only one here? Are you the owner? You know, do you run this place? She said, no, the boss is gone. I'm the only girl. And we began to have this conversation with her and present her with a gift. And this gift was just a cool gift full of all kinds of goodies, a hygiene kit and Burt's Beeswax and loofahs and all this girly stuff decorated up with a little gift on top. And we tried to present this to her at first, and she was suspicious. And as the conversation went on, her countenance began to change. And there began to be a tear in her eye well up, and she lightened up, and there was a little bit of a smile, and we presented this gift to her. And she began to tear into it, and then out of nowhere, she began to yell as loud as she could down the hallway. I mean, it was in her language, Mandarin, whatever she was speaking. She began to yell, and about 5 more young ladies came around the corner dressed similarly, all living there, all eating there, all sleeping there. This was their life, all underage. And she began to talk to them and show them the gift that she got, and then she asked us in her language, or in English, she said, do you have any more for my friends? See, at first she said she was the only one there. And then now she's like, okay, this isn't business as usual. You're going to offer, you know, we have a gift. This is amazing. So we went back to our vehicle. We grabbed 5 or 6 more bags. We brought them in and offered them, you know, just these little gift bags. And what they didn't know is in their language written as a little card that they can call a number for help if they want. And we began to offer them these gifts, and they began to tear into them. And then they did something completely crazy that blew my mind. This story has stuck in my brain since it happened. It's one of the most unique experiences. But they began to tear into these hygiene kits and get all the goodies. And then one of them got on a chair, and she moved the panel like this, and she tossed hers up there. And then one got under the couch, and she put hers under the couch cushions in the back and stuffed her little goodies there. And then they took all the bags and all the decorations, and they wadded them up, and they're looking around, and they shoved them back in our face. They're like, we can't put these in the trash, is what she said. I can't put these in the trash. They'll see. The owners will see. And if they know we have items like this, they'll take them from us. But so you have to take these, throw them away. Now go before the owners come back. And that really, it sank into my heart. It broke my heart, because I don't know if you're like me, but on the way to Vegas, you stop, or on the way to Disneyland in California, you stop at Vegas, and it's family friendly is what they call it. You walk up and down the streets and play a few penny slots if that's what you do, and you go to the M&M store with your kids. But a block and a half off the strip, there's 5 or 6 young ladies who are having sex 20, maybe 30 times a day with men who don't know them, who purchase them, who treat them as objects. And they live in a tiny storefront, a fraction of the size of this room we're in today. And that changed me, because, you know, it just reminded me that trafficking, it doesn't always look like a girl in fishnet stockings walking up and down the streets in a short skirt and high heels, and a pimp in a purple jacket and a big hat. It's business owners. You know, a pimp is one thing, but a business owner is something else. And a business owner profiting on these young ladies, it looks totally different. I remember another short story. I remember we were speaking in schools in southern Missouri a couple years ago, and we share red flags. Jen mentioned our anti-trafficking school assembly program. I remember this was it was a big school, a couple thousand kids, and we have screens and videos, and we have a survivor or two that shares their story. And man, let me tell you, when Leah shares her story, oh man, she begins to share her story of exploitation and what happened to her. There's not a school assembly that happens. I guarantee you have to come sometime. There's not a school assembly that happens where after she shares her story of pain and exploitation, where a young lady from the stands at the top or the middle, wherever, runs down at the end, wraps her arms around Leah, and says these words. And it sounds dramatic, but it's not. Every time you hear this statement, the story that you shared today. Now this isn't in Thailand or Amsterdam, this is in America in our schools. Every school, a young lady comes, wraps her arms around Leah, our survivor, and she says, the story you shared today, that's the story of my life. I've never told anyone, that's my story. Your story is my story. And I'm not going to leave this gym floor until you get me help. This was the same school, same typical small town America. I remember being in that same spot and thinking, oh, here it comes. Leah just got through sharing. We're closing, we're wrapping up. I share kind of a closing altar call, but it's secular because it's a school. Kids come down and they're signing on this big butcher paper. They're signing what they're going to do. I'm going to be a hero in my school. I'm going to look out for my friends. And I'm waiting. I'm kind of getting excited. I'm like, here she comes. Leah's over there. She's just by herself. Here she comes. And this young man, a senior in high school, walks by me and he goes to our DJ, who's kind of the cool guy in school. He's the cool guy. And Bo talks about his moments dealing with suicide, trying to commit suicide, and a friend showing up and helping him. And so this young man felt comfortable talking to Bo. He walks past me. I'm waiting to give him a high five because I'm the funny guy. I tell all the jokes at the beginning and then close out. But Bo had a heartfelt story, and he was a dude. And this young man felt really good about talking with Bo. And so he began to share his story with Bo. And he said, I don't want to talk to the girl over there, but he said, my mom's a drug addict. She's been addicted to drugs my whole life. We live in a trailer just a few miles from here. And he said, so when I was 11 years old, my mom took me to the truck stop, and she told me what to do in these trucks. And she would take me from truck to truck, and I would go and do sexual services. He didn't say sexual services, he said blowjobs. He said I would give these truckers blowjobs. And he said, my mom said, this is how we have to take care of the family, son. This is how we get groceries. He said, when I was 11 years old, it started, and he said, last weekend I was there working again. And if I can say this in just to explain the situation, he was a very heterosexual, jock-looking kid, good-looking kid. You would never know this was the life this young man was living. And he began to just pour out his soul and share. And he said, before this moment, I never knew I was being exploited. You said exploited. He said, I've seen sex trafficking ads all over the nation. I've seen billboards, and I've never said, oh, I'm a sex trafficking victim. Most all victims never self-identify and say, I'm being trafficked. I'm trafficked. I'm a victim of sex trafficking. They just know something bad is happening to them. And if we can connect with them in a way and say, this isn't right, you're being exploited, we can change their lives. Our problem is our definition. I'm not crying. My eyes just watered. Sorry, guys. It works good for fundraising, though, right? So. But our whole definition of this sex trafficking, we kind of get in this one rut. And if we can step outside of that and say, exploitation. Let's look at this in a different paradigm. We can change some lives, especially in our churches around the nation. I got stories I could tell you all day long. We're dealing with a case right now in Mesa County. I told my family, I was like, man, I'm excited to be in Grand Junction in a community where kids can be safe. We were stirring the pot in Las Vegas a little too much. And the phone rang a few weeks ago. First case, I've been here a year and a half, and in town. A young lady called and said, hey, we've got a situation. And we're dealing with a case right now in Mesa County, just a few blocks from here. A young lady's being exploited. It's a dad and a son and 6 young girls. They all live in an apartment, and we've got a connection with one girl who's asking for hope. And she has never heard the term sex trafficking. She's never considered herself a prostitute. But this young man, he's a Romeo. He's connected to her relationally. She still says things like love when it comes to talking about this young man. And he gets her high, gets her drunk, blacked out, and then she wakes up tied to a bed and with a party going on, and multiple men abusing her at night. She hasn't signed a statement because she doesn't want to get her boyfriend in trouble. She won't sign a statement, won't confess, but she's willing to get help. And so we're working right now to get her out of Mesa County to a rescue home. Bravestone's helping us. They're a part of this and helping us make an impact. And I love partnering with local people and churches to make real things happen. And it's happening in our community. Your head's in the sand if you think trafficking isn't affecting our teens and our kids in this community. And we can do something about it, you know. I believe unapologetically, God calls some to give and some to go. And this is not a funding campaign, but you know, you have a talent or a skill set or a resource that can be put to use, that God wants to use. Maybe you're a prayer person, maybe you're an educator, maybe you're a youth leader, maybe you're just connected in the community and an influencer, and you can bring people together. You know, our school assemblies, one of the big influencers in that moment was when we were able to get booked, we're actually booking in the spring, was a local real estate company who said, we'll pay for everything. We'll pay for it all. The school, District 51 doesn't have to spend a penny. We'll fund the entire thing. It's about $20,000 for a couple weeks tour with a big production, and bringing all the speakers and survivors in. And they said, we want to make an impact in our community. And I don't even mind, I'll just tell you, that was the Kimbrough team. You know, they said, hey, we're going to make an impact. I love when communities come together and make this stuff happen. But we've got to redefine how we think about trafficking. We can't have these old ways stuck in our heads. I'll keep moving. So trafficking is a bigger part of a system, and I know we talked about this a little bit, but trafficking is the result of a system that we're dealing with in our communities and around the nation, and it comes down to prostitution, stripping, pornography. These are main inroads into trafficking, as you know. The pornography world is a huge fueler of sex trafficking. Pornographers will abuse their victims, and it's very similar to a trafficker or an exploiter. They'll do the same things, yet they'll film it and then they'll put it online. And we call it pornography, but it's trafficking. We've got stripping. Man, we have a strip club here in town in Mesa County, or in the buffer zone out there. And I know a lady in town who multiple of these girls work at her organization or work where she works, and she's communicating with them. And they aren't doing it because they may act like it sometimes, but when you get to know them, they're there for a specific purpose, and it's the only choice that they have to make money. And it's fueling this trafficking economy around the nation. And so we've got to really look at not just like, hey, trafficking is a girl walking the street with a pimp, but it's a conglomerate of the pornography industry, the stripping and strip clubs that feed this, as well as prostitution. And I think you could look at me and say, well, prostitution isn't that, you know, we really can't separate prostitution from trafficking or this exploitation piece too. I think a lot of people separate that, and they say, you know, well, aren't there girls who are prostitutes who aren't trafficked? And in a lot of our outreaches, we do talk to ladies who say, I don't have a pimp, I don't got a controller, I ain't got no boyfriend, stop calling me, stop talking to me, you know, on the streets in Vegas. And they say, I don't got this, I chose this life, you know, 10 years ago, I'm just fine, I'm safe, you know. Well, are they trafficked? Or they chose this? And this is what I would say to you about that. That prostitution is a choice for those with the fewest choices. Okay, this is the choice of those with the fewest choices. And so to me, that's forced into the life because of a lack of options. And church person, caring community member, whoever you are in this room, youth leader, I don't know what you do, what your background is. But if you don't give the world an option, then I guarantee you there's a supernatural force, not to be too preachy, but we're in a church today. The enemy's going to give them an option, and he's not going to stop. So our job, our responsibility as the church, we've got to provide more options for those in these places so prostitution, sex trafficking, and exploitation doesn't continue to happen. Does that make sense? The enemy's not going to stop fighting. That's kind of an old term. The enemy isn't going to stop fighting for this young lady I'm working with here in town with one of our team members. She's not going to stop fighting. The enemy's not going to stop fighting, so we can't stop fighting. And it's a grim battle that's going on between these two lives. And if we can wrap our heads around this and understand, hey, they may not be trafficked, but it's a lack of choices. So here's a great way to define, as we redefine trafficking in our world. There's the definition of trafficking, the legal terms. We have to know that. We've got to have that education, that basis. That's what Jen was sharing with you this morning. Very heady stuff, very intellectual stuff, very smart. I'm more of a dummy, so I'm not as smart as Jen, so I have to break stuff down and make it simple for me to know. All the things she shared, we can wrap up in this. This is another way to define trafficking. You find an evidence of an exchange of value. So we deal with a lot of cases where a 14, 15-year-old girl decides to give a sexual service for a new phone. She doesn't have a phone, parents can't afford it, lives in a marginalized neighborhood, low socioeconomic neighborhood. She wants a phone, she's in school, she feels left out. She sleeps with a guy, or maybe two. Maybe there's a Romeo pimp who shows up in her life and says, hey, you do this thing at this party with these guys, here's your new iPhone. There's an exchange of value that happened, and in a court of law, that can be prosecuted, if we can prove it. That's the hard part. Jen mentioned that. Building a case, or Denise did. Building a case is really hard. So a lot of times we end up rescuing the girl and the pimps go free. I would say that happens more so than not. Building a case is tough, but if we can show as a youth leader or somebody in one of our family members and say, hey, she's sleeping on the couch, she gets a free place to stay, but she's got to do this for this guy. That's an exchange of value, and that's trafficking in our world. That's trafficking in a court of law, if we can explain that. That's from a DA, from attorneys in my world. They say, here, let me break it down for you, Dawson. Make it simple because you're dumb. So I explained the system: pornography, stripping, prostitution. The system points to vulnerability, lack of options. So we're kind of building this funnel. We got this funnel and we're breaking it down to you at the church. So bear with me, okay? Hang with me. It's pointing at vulnerability. So we've got trafficking, we've got law enforcement stings, we've got aftercare homes, we've got all this crazy stuff going on. You're thinking, wow, this is crazy. This is human trafficking. How can it possibly be connected to my world personally? Not your world as in Mesa County, but to you, sir, and to you, ma'am. How can you make an impact? Well, it's pointing to vulnerability. That's where it's coming from. We're digging down to the root of trafficking in our communities, okay? This is real stuff. This is how we make a difference. It's vulnerability and a lack of options. That's getting these young ladies, these young men into this life. And that's where we can make a serious impact. And so I want to jump into the second part and talk about strategies for faith-based intervention. That's a fancy way for saying, what can the church do? Okay? And when you go to the fancy places and you have to share strategies for how do we impact communities, you have to say it like this, or they kick you out. But this is really, in my world, what can the church do about trafficking? That's what it means. What can the church do? What can we do? What can Messiah Lutheran do? What can the churches in the community do about sex trafficking here? How do we protect our kids, our nieces, and our nephews? Let's talk about that for a couple seconds here. So this was mentioned earlier with your previous your speakers, but I think it's important to really understand this, especially if we're leaders or influencers who really want to do something. I'm the kind of guy who I'm a fixer. I'm not a contemplator, or when I'm talking with my wife and she shares a problem, I don't understand that she just wants to share the problem, with me and have me nod my head. I'm like, well, just do this, and she gets mad at me because I'm trying to fix it and just sort of listen. And so I think
That's the difference between a male and a female.
That's the truth, sister. Amen. And I do that a lot, and I think males and females do this a lot when it comes to our communities. I think we just go, let's do something. We don't care if it's right, but we're going to do something, because I got to get this off my chest. My kids are my babies. You got mama bears. Like, we're going to do something. And is that something the right thing to do? And so I want to challenge you, implore to you, if you're a leader, influencer, if you're not just looking at Pastor Mike and saying, I'm just going to follow whatever Pastor Mike does, then I'm speaking to Pastor Mike. If you're the leader in your community, you're in politics, you're in another church, and you're going to start something, you're going to do something, then I want to speak to you and say, let the research guide your calling. Let the education guide your calling. It's education first and then outreach when it comes to this. Man, we can set up an amazing soup kitchen and serve some great grog and hot dogs and burgers in the park for homeless people. And that'll work. And we can share the gospel with homeless people. And that's I'm not going to say it's a no-brainer, but we can do that and it's effective. When it comes to trafficking, there's a piece and a part to this that takes a little bit of thinking. We've got to be strategic. We've got to get educated first. And then we can start making our moves to do the right thing. Because if we don't, here's what will happen. With most of these girls, they've experienced some major trauma. If we say the wrong things, we do the wrong things, there's a potential that we'll lose them. Now, you don't need to be afraid and say, I'm just never going to do anything. But there's just a little bit of learning. There's a little bit of like figuring this out. And we can make a serious impact in our community and be a serious resource to law enforcement, to the district attorney's office. This church, your church, can be a serious resource, not we got to put up with this faith-based community, but you can be a serious resource in your community if we'll start and let the research guide our calling. And you've got the research this morning. You've got some of the information this morning. You've got a great foundation this morning. You need to get those PowerPoint notes from Jen and take them home and read through them and look through this and say, okay, this is the scope of trafficking in our world. And so as you jump into this rabbit hole, it's education first, okay? And then as a church or a person, I want to let this sink in real quick. We're going to get to some more techie stuff, more practical stuff here in just a second. But you got to know this, that compassion isn't convenient. And this is a real problem. This is a real problem I see in the church world. Not your church, the church world, other churches, okay?
Thank you.
It's your joke.
Yeah. This is a problem. Compassion isn't convenient. The last 2 weeks of my world have been wrecked. Family dinners, wrecked. Late night calls, woke up in the morning. Her entire presentation, you heard my phone buzzing back there because this guy's pulling this girl, convincing her to move back into his apartment. She's going to go to a home October 4th. We're flying her out. We literally have a volunteered G5 private Learjet to fly into Grand Junction, who we have. But it's not convenient. It's interrupted my life, my routine, my comfort zone, my TV watching time, my Netflix time. My heart has been wrecked. Compassion isn't convenient. And I dare say most churchgoers, not you, most churchgoers in our world don't have the stamina, they don't have the grit to really get into someone's life and help them. And if you don't have this, then don't start this work. Then write a big check and stay home and be comfortable. And maybe God's called you to that. Maybe you're a rich sucker in this room and God's loaded the bank accounts and you're going to pay for all this. But there's going to be Jen. There's going to be Pastor Mike. You seem like one of those guys. I don't know who else. There's some people in this room who are saying, I'm going to be in the trenches making this happen. And I just want to put that out there to scare you off. I want to tell you no. I want to tell you don't start this unless you're willing to be interrupted in life. Because you're going to shed tears. I kid you not. I'm not just saying this to make a great talk or whatever. I was driving, and when I turned the corner, where all that construction's going on, over by American Furniture Warehouse, I turned to come up north. I was listening to a worship song, praying for this young lady, call her H. And I just burst into tears. And I parked, and I took a moment and composed myself because I was just bawling in prayer for this young lady, because it's wrecking my world, because I want to help her so bad. It's not convenient to help people in our world. And I just implore you or ask you, if you're going to do this, first get your heart broken. Because that broken heart and that calling is going to sink in, and that's going to sustain you through some pretty... We've had girls in our home, my little girls serving them ice cream. You want a scoop? No, I want 6 scoops. And then they go back 3 weeks later, and we find them being sold online in Houston, Texas. Young girls we pulled out and invested hours into end up going back into the life. It's going to break your heart, and it's not going to be convenient. And that's my not gatekeeper, but here's the, if you can do this, then the next part's for you. So Here's how we make an impact in our churches. This is how we help people. If you want to just go to church and be comfortable, and we'll see you in heaven, amen. I'm excited for you. There's nothing wrong with that. But we can make an impact in our communities, in our world, if we start looking beyond the needs. Let me just explain this real quick. So as people walk through the foyer of your church and they come into your life, there's going to be needs presented. And these are needs that I say are on the radar. They're needs that present themselves, that people ask for, that's public, and you can see them in our community. But sex trafficking, exploitation, abuse is never going to be a need that someone just above the radar says, hey, my nephew is being, sometimes they say that, but it's more of a below the surface, and there's a need in front of it. Does that make sense? And so when there's needs that come up in our world and our community and our church, I call it the church foyer when it comes to the church. As needs begin to come our way, we've got to learn how to look beyond the need that's being presented publicly. Does that make sense? And if you do this, you'd be surprised what'll pop up. The church foyer, this is families. When I say the church foyer, this is people walking into your foyer. This is new people, guests. You have walk-ins, but it's families seeking help for troubled teens, walk-in seeking assistance for any need, maybe a place to stay. How many times as a homeless person came in, or a drifting family walk through the doors of the church and say, hey, can you pay for a hotel room? Hey, we need some food. Maybe is the food bank open? There's a public need, but if we'll begin to look beyond those needs for some of the red flags, homelessness, single moms, poverty and low-income individuals, the addicted and druggies, aged out foster care, it's a huge, huge need in our community. Maybe it's a concerned parent, grandparent, or guardian that comes to you and says, man, maybe it's in conversation over coffee, and they just say something and say, hey, this is going on in my family, and you go, wow, I'll pray for that. But if you'll just take a moment, and you'll begin to flip over a few more stones, you begin to dig into those situations, you'll find a situation like this young lady, H, that we're dealing with this week. Her mom came and just said, hey, can I get, do you have any counseling services or anything you can, connect? My daughter needs some help. She's dealing with some alcohol problems, and is there maybe some help with a rehab? Like, can you connect us to something like that? That was it. That was the request. And as our friend, a caring friend of H's, connected with us, and she said, hey, there's a mom who's concerned for her daughter, and she's got some alcohol issues. And she says she's kind of a rough relationship, but just wants some help, and maybe if there's something we can offer her, rent assistance, something, would you mind meeting with the mom? Because this young lady on our team, she knows this. She says, I just want to kick over a few more stones and see what's going on in this girl's life. And I think at a majority of our churches, when someone walks through the doors, this is an inconvenience. Somebody wants a free night hotel, or they want rent assistance, or they want something. It's like, yeah, okay, this happens a million times a month. People wanting something, walking through our doors, coming into our lives. But if we're willing to kick over a few more stones as those needs present themselves, we're willing to dig a little deeper, we'll begin to find other things. As Julie began to dig into this young lady's life, it seemed a little more shady. Did she ask if the mom would meet with me? And I met with mom and began to ask her a series of questions and say, hey, what's the situation with your daughter? What's your situation? And we begin to dig a little bit deeper and deeper, all because compassion isn't convenient, all because we're focused in, going, there's something more here. And before we knew it, we realized she was living with 2 men, 6 other girls. We began to see cell phone pictures and realized that there was something more to the situation. It's not a prosecuted trafficking case, but 6 young ladies are being pimped out at parties in our community because one young lady was willing to go, yeah, here's your rent check. Yeah, here you go. We'll pull something out of the benevolence fund. Have a good day. She was willing to take a moment and look beyond the need. Make sense? It's a great way our church can make a huge impact. This is where we find the vulnerable. You already know this, but strip clubs, active tracks, that's more of a metropolitan problem. Massage parlors, truck stops, at-risk neighborhoods. Online is huge, especially for this area. Shelters, 24/7 spas, adult entertainment stores, low-income apartments, dance clubs, bars, and hotels. So I talked about the foyer. how we reach out to those who walk through our foyer, and I think that's applicable to most of us, at just living a Christian life, being a caring person in our community. I think we can start digging a little deeper in those individuals who come our way. And then as we go beyond the walls of the church and do outreach in communities, we've literally worked with and helped churches set up outreach in these specific areas in their communities. Now, Mesa County is a little bit different. It's our home as well. I think online is huge. I think we have a strip club. I'm not sure if we have any 24/7 spas. We do have a few massage parlors. I don't know if they're illegal sex businesses, but we can definitely look into that. But I think there's an opportunity for us to get further training and to be able to reach out into some of these communities if you're interested. And this is where you find it in a community. This is where a church is going to find it in a community. And it starts with letting research start that calling. Yeah.
One thing I forgot to talk about, but this goes right along with Andrew, is the homeless community here.
Yeah.
So we have a large homeless community, and one of our founding members from Gravestone is actually Mona Heinlein, who's has the Joseph Center, which is one of the homeless outreach programs. But there is a trafficking, there is trafficking that occurs within the homeless community. It's very common, and it happens here.
Absolutely.
So
No
that's,
doubt.
yeah, that's another piece that we have in our community that I totally forgot to mention until Andrew started talking about it. But within the homeless community, there is an issue of trafficking. And a lot of the times, it's like Andrew was saying, like a girl sleeps with a guy for a cell phone, where it's someone sleeps with someone who offers them a warm place to stay.
Absolutely.
Or a hot meal. And so the homeless community, they are highly at risk here in our community, and it's a very growing population of homeless here.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
And, on your slide one back, adult entertainment stores, I don't know if you know Messiah members, there's one just a few blocks away, right next to the vacuum shop on North.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that. Yep.
Yep.
There's one out by the city market, too.
By what?
There's one by the city market on 24 Road.
Oh.
Canyon,
Yeah, that's
Okay.
what I've seen. This is one of those things where further training, I'm just throwing out like, hey, if a church or community member wants to start working in this, we take the next step. And we have young ladies working in Houston who work in strip clubs every week. They go in and they love on these girls, and they're in the back room, and the managers love them, and they're bringing them goodies. And Valerie has Thanksgiving dinner with about 12 or 15 of these strippers every year, because they're all single moms and families out of town, and they can bring their babies over and love on them. Massage parlors, it's the story I told you. We go in, even though there's only one here, there's 200 in Vegas, so it's a little different feel, but it's still something you can do. Online, we set up an online call center, and we reach out to escorts all around the nation, depending on where our operations are going. That kind of training. And then there's just a lot of options here if you're willing to go beyond the foyer of the church. Nothing wrong with being active and having those eyes looking with compassion. Jesus looked with compassion and saw they were hurting without a shepherd, right? Matthew 8:20 something, I don't know, somewhere in there. He looked at the crowd and he had compassion for them. Compassion is different than pity. Pity is a bad feeling we have, but compassion is action. It's doing something about how we feel. And so compassion is taking action about that feeling of pity. And Jesus had compassion on people. Sorry, I'm preaching a little bit on you there. My bad.
We have a lot of low-income housing, the situations exist. My wife and I, we work in that
Absolutely.
environment.
The young lady I'm working with now with Julie, she's kind of the main, it's a lady-focused world when it comes to girls. That's how it works. But it's in a low-income apartment complex here in town. And we're connected with the managers and surveillance, all that kind of stuff going on. And it's a really, it's very much down your lane right there, man. So I'd love to connect with you too. Help you get some resources going for your tenants especially. So, but that's just an option, just something that popped up. And so I want to give you just a quick action plan on how to respond to exploitation. If your church does dive into this, what it looks like. No one ever explained to me like the process of like getting a girl who's been exploited, trafficked from A to Z, okay? And you may say, doesn't law enforcement do this? Absolutely not. Law enforcement is amazing. We support law enforcement. and we work with them, but they're trained to get the bad guy, they're trained to see what laws are broken, to build a case, to prosecute somebody. They're there to keep us safe. They're there to keep these girls safe as well, and they do a great job of it, and we love law enforcement. But they're not there to reach into these girls' lives, take them from A to Z, restorative care, aftercare, to get them to a place where they're actually existing like a normal human being. Obviously, they're going to deal with trauma and PTSD the rest of their life if it's been a bad case. But law enforcement isn't aftercare social workers. And so we can't blame them because that's not their job. It's the church's job, the widows and the orphans. It's the community members of Mesa County. And sorry if I've been a little preachy. I'm not sure if you're a church group or not. But I'm a Christian and I get a little preachy and it's a church, so that's how it works. I apologize if
No,
that's a little offensive.
don't
to you guys.
apologize.
So I don't know the crowd. So, you know, I think that's the church and community's job, is to come alongside these young ladies with resources, and young men, because we don't always mention them as well. So here's how we respond to exploitation in our town, okay? So let's say your community group, your task force, your church, your organization, you want to set up and say, hey, we want to be a part of this. We want to be a serious resource to our community. This is how it starts right here. Here's the action plan. First, you're going to have predetermined and pre-set up aftercare services for these young ladies. This is a home established who is willing to take a placement, who's more, and placement isn't an easy thing, because if she's pregnant, if she's addicted to drugs, there's all these rules, okay, when it comes to finding a home that will take these young ladies. 99% of the time, you're going to want that home to be out of state. So if something happens, you're going to want that to be out of state. As a church, if you go, we're going to start a sex trafficking ministry, or we're going to partner with Bravestone, like, to make this happen. You know, organizations like myself, this is exactly what I do as an organization. I already have this set up. Bravestone is in the process of setting up all this and other areas, but you have aftercare set up for a case or a young lady when it happens. So it's pre-set up. So you're not having to search for where do we take this girl? You know, it's set up and ready to go. We have resources available. This is stuff like pregnancy care centers, food banks, temporary housing, funding that goes along with that, to say, hey, we're going to pay for flights and travel and clothing. We're going to basically have this resource pool setting, waiting, ready. We're going to have a home available for a girl with a bed for a one-year program, or funds to pay for that, hopefully, and we're ready to roll. Like, we can help. It's not just going to go out and grab someone off the street and then be like, now what do we do with her? Oh my gosh. This is probably the most important thing, is to set up that aftercare piece. If you're a church member or someone in the community, it's wise if you have a concern about a niece, a nephew, a grandkid, something going on in your world, connect with your church, connect with an organization, and just find out what's available, just in case something happens. Have a plan of action ready, which is coming up here shortly. So next is consistent outreach. So this is how we use this. Is we do this. We go to the strip clubs. When the foyer's open at our churches and our churches are doing outreach, we're not just getting our chicken and potato salad at the church barbecue. We're looking for the new family who's coming into town, maybe a troubled family who was invited by Sister so-and-so, or we're looking around our community to these troubled places, and we're going to do consistent outreach. And I want to look at consistent more than outreach. The more consistent we are, the more fluid it's going to get. And the more people are going to come to us and say, hey, you're always doing that. Here's a case. Hey, you're always doing that. I'm a concerned parent. Hey, you're always doing that. I'm in need. The more you're in that consistency zone, the more people are going to come to you. The phone's going to ring a lot more, and they're going to depend on you for these resources. So we have some resources in place. We have a plan. And then consistent outreach. We're going to reach out to our community. We're going to do a regular thing, monthly, about, a couple times a month, whatever. Then next is a transitional action plan. And so in our case with this young lady we're working with right now, the transitional action plan's a little fluid, but you have a plan for when they say yes. When they say, yeah, I want help, I want out, I want a new life, I want to disappear, he's abusing me, I need help. You gotta not just kind of go, okay, I'm gonna talk to so-and-so, figure out what we need to do. You need to say, you need to be at that coffee shop in that meeting and say, here's plan A, here's plan B, here's plan C. Okay, number 1, you're going to do this. Number 2, we're going to do this. Number 3, we're going to do this. And you're going to get you here. You're going to get on a plane. You're going to be at a home. Here's the name of the home. Here's where we're at. We're going to pay for everything. Everything's covered. We've got you taken care of, girl. Like, we have a plan, and that builds confidence in a survivor. I don't call them a victim at that point. They're survivors, man. They're tough. They're making this happen. That's that transitional action plan. It's on paper. It's a PDF. It's something that your organization or your church or your community task force or group knows what to do. And then restorative long-term care, it looks like an aftercare home. It looks like a year where you have a place. That's this aftercare. It's this place, you've connected with them, they know what you do, they're expecting you, they've got a bed reserved. They've got 2 beds reserved, they got 6 beds, 10 beds reserved. So I can kind of walk you through those, but aftercare resources, establish pre-placement arrangement, that's a tongue tire. Pregnancy care center, medical, addiction recovery rehab, you have on standby transportation, security, temporary housing. Security is a little, obviously that would be kind of a gut thing. If it's an abusive relationship, you can call law enforcement and see what they can tell you. There's a lot of ex-military and off-duty law enforcement who, if there's anything shady, they can definitely step in. So this is like the real deal stuff that we deal with. So just letting you have it today. So we train a lot of other organizations and task force with this. So if it doesn't apply, you're getting behind the curtains on some stuff. So consistent outreach, strip clubs, brothels, massage parlors, jail ministry is huge. A lot of these girls are coming out of jail, a lot of abuse victims. Street outreach on local tracks. This would be metropolitan like Denver, so that probably doesn't apply here unless there's a track where there's a track is where there's walking girls. They're literally walking. In Figueroa Street in LA, they walk completely nude. You just drive down and it's completely nude, 18-year-old, 20-year-old girls walking, no clothes at all. Cops don't even arrest them. There'll be dozens of them. That's a track. Guys can pick them up, or Johns can, and pay for them. Walk-ins and counseling cases. So this would be your church. Just walk-ins. That's digging beyond the need and having a plan. So have a plan, transitional plan, response team and responsibilities. It's good to separate responsibilities and say, hey, if we have a girl come in, if something happens in my world, like having some people in your world to go, hey, I got your back. We'll do this as a team. There's a concerned parent, grandparent, there's a troubled family, low-income family struggling, like we're going to be the sister team. We're gonna go at this together and share that burden. If we don't, it's going to be exhausting. So, and then restorative long-term care. This is pre-placement partnership. It's huge. You can't jump into this and pull people off the streets and then break their trust when you have nothing for them. It's the worst thing we could ever do. So, and that's the action plan, and I am done. So.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if you were familiar with Sarah's home over on the other side of the mountain.
Yes, yeah, they're actually in our network of people. We have a large network of homes that a few hundred, with all the different stuff going on around the states. She's there at Prophet, I think is her name. Vicky Prophet, I think.
Yeah, Vicky Prophet.
Remember correctly? Yeah, good people. And that's a calling on its own. Maybe some of you are called to start a home here in town. So I would love to help with that. I know Bravestone would do. So. We actually have a friend who you can think of a question. It's question and answer time for 10 minutes.
Yes.
I'll just tell you this. We had some land potentially. It's not donated, but it's available to us. And we have some, I have a friend who's a Navy SEAL, works with us on rescues and does all the dangerous, scary stuff for us. I stand back around the corner and he does everything for us. Him and his wife bought 20 acres in Florida, and they're putting tiny homes on this acreage. And it's the second phase. So after a girl goes to a restorative care home, long-term, she's off the streets, goes and gets recovery, addiction recovery. She's kind of in that functioning zone. Most, like Refuge for Women, they just go, okay, get an apartment, get a job, you're free, like you made it, And so it's a real scary time for them coming out of a real controlled season of their life. And so what Troy and his wife are doing is they're taking in these girls. They have about 10 homes, and they're just saying, you live here, we'll keep your car fixed, we'll help you get a job, plug you into college. We're just going to walk with you hand in hand. It's not a program, it's not a team challenge or anything. There's no, not a lot of accountability, but it's a free place to live. It's your own little place. We're going to walk with you for a year and get your feet on the ground, make sure you're successful. We've been donated some land out in Loma and Mac, and we're contemplating doing that same thing here. My wife and I are. We haven't pulled the trigger yet. We're just kind of waiting. It's a big responsibility, but that could be potentially something in the next few years. So, yes, ma'am.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You have a lot of facets to this, and it seems very complex and involved. Is there any one area you could suggest to the church that we could impact first or mostly, rather than taking on the whole project?
Two answers to that. One, I don't know what God has for you in your calling and your skill set and your talents, what you have at your disposal. Moses, use what is in your hand. So I don't know that, so I can't be God and tell you, like, hey, but I can, give you some suggestions and say, hey, here's what, and I don't know if that comes from my heart, but I can say that the lack of, I think the lack of educational events in the community, awareness events would be huge. And then being a resource, just what I explained here, being a resource to law enforcement. So I just had a conversation with a law enforcement officer. He's like, we've come on multiple cases, where I don't even know who to call. Like, I'm just making an arrest. And I'm like, that chick needs help. Like, can I give her a card? Being a resource, setting up a database, or being a resource to the community where law enforcement can hand a card and they can call you. And you can say, hey girl, I can help you out. That's pretty edgy, and it's pretty committed, but I think that's a huge resource for law enforcement in our community that I think a church could make an impact in. I have to think about it, so there's a lot to it. So you're looking for one specific thing, like, hey, where do we start? So let's take some time and let the research figure that out. Like, let's do some research. Let's not make a decision right here today. Let's figure out, if that's something you're interested in, let's grab my card and let's figure out, let's talk and see where we can put you to work and make an impact. Let's not be too hasty. But yes, I'm with you, so I love it.
My thought on this right now, what he's asking is, I think, being aware of what's going on and being ready if somebody walked in the door, and being able to think about calling you then.
Yeah.
And using the research that's already there.
Absolutely, yeah.
So which card are you on that table?
Oh yeah.
How do I get a hold of you?
I'm this card right here.
Yeah.
And
I think
if I'm not in town, we're working all over. Jen is your best resource, so there's my card here, sir. And Jen's got her card right over there. So,
I think that would be the easiest, simplest way to start. So
Yeah.
everything else got figured out, and then finding out who wants to do what.
and that's exactly what I was mentioning. I know Pastor Mike is leading this, and that's a personal responsibility for each of us to say, hey, we're gonna have that heart of compassion, and we're gonna have we're gonna have those eyes open to see, beyond that first initial need. Here's a homeless person. Let's dig into this. But what Pastor Mike is getting at, as a church community, what's our next steps, and how do we really resource this community and make an impact? And we can bring in training. If there's ladies who, I'm just shooting at ideas, and this is what we do. We train churches on how to reach into strip clubs. We can come in and train. I know you have a lot of domestic violence history. We can do trainings on how to respond to that. And trainings kind of get old after a while. But I think somebody mentioned it, setting up an action plan is a huge great step to say, hey, we're going to start building a network, whether that's a ministry name or something, but we're going to have a network, a task force, and I know there's probably already another task force, but we're going to have, here's the resources. We have a home available. We have transitional funds available. We're ready to respond when you call me or Jen and we have this girl available, you can step in and be a part of that transitional process. Because we're handling that now. I'm raising actually funds for this young lady now. It's not a funding plea, so I'm not asking for that. But I'm doing that on my own. To have that resource available to say, hey man, here's this girl. It's 100% being trafficked. We want to get her to a home. To have that plan in place, I think that would be an excellent place to start and ready to rock. And it's just ready to roll. So, yes, ma'am.
Heavenly Father, we do thank you, Lord. As we live in this world of sin, so much goes on. People's lives are affected. People's lives are broken. People's lives are crushed. And yet you've given your church, the body of Christ, here around the world, and right here on 12th and Teller as well, to be that healing point. Thank you for the work that is being done with Jen and her friends, and with Andrew and his wife, and just all around the place. And we pray, Lord, that as different congregations are represented here today, that you would use us, lead us by your Spirit, so that somewhere in this plan, you already have a plan that we will fit in, and you will make us shine in that part. For everybody who's here today, thank you for that. Also, Lord, send your angels to guard and protect them on their way home, and we lift this all up in the name of Jesus. Amen.